illness to the effects of your mom, your mom is in a hospital, but it was never like a full conversation. They never talked about it in school. But even as a little girl, I remember going to the counselor. Like we would have and now as an adult, I'm like, why did they have me going to the counselor? But it was like, I needed, I guess, to go to the counselor. I would go to the counselor. We would have like these little lunch and learns. Again, I couldn't understand why I was in them, but looking back, I was like, I remember going to the counselor. I remember one time my mom had tried to commit suicide and the counselor came, and I'm like in the 3rd grade. And as an adult, you don't understand how these things affect you. You like, until you start talking about it, it's like, I'm remembering it was almost a little bit traumatic. So that's my mental illness story from my mother's standpoint. But from my own standpoint, I suffer from anxiety. And and me and Jazz was talking about this before we got on the mic. We gave it every name but what it was.
Yep. We did.
And even when we start to name it, we still coddle it
to the side. Yeah.
We don't, and I don't know if that's because we don't know how to deal with it,
or we don't want it to be viewed as a bad thing.
Well, it's everything that you said before, though. It's the pride. It's the,
correct.
It's the, I don't want to have something because there's such a negative stigma. But I think that's why we as Black people, and I commend our Caucasian counterparts and
do, because they will
that
cry.
Get it. Yeah. And that go for it, because they don't have.
Yeah.
And I just think that it's purging. I mean, just think about how good you feel when you get stuff out.
When
it's out. And I think that's why. But it goes back further than that.
Mm-hmm.
I think for us, yes, it's genetic. It's tribal, and it's a lot of it. And I know people be like, oh, they always got to go back to slavery, and they always got to go back to this. But there is.
It is,
There's some history that's involved.
Absolutely.
Because imagine the beatings, the whippings, the rape of your wife. You had to stand there and watch that. Imagine your
and that
kid
does
being
something to your psyche.
Ripped out of your hands and taken to another slave masters. You couldn't cry.
Right.
You had to get your behind back out there and get strong.
And go to work. Else you was going to get beaten or hung. Exactly.
And by the way, come take this so that I can make sure you produce another child.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like we've been bred to withdraw.
Yeah.
Correct.
And one thing that they also said, just speaking to the numbers, because you were saying a lot of our Caucasian friends, they do go and get help. And they were saying only about 1/4 of African Americans seek mental health care compared to about 40% of white people. And this is what they say some of the reasons are. And again, this is from the National Alliance on Mental Illness. One reason they say is we don't go and get help because we don't trust them and we've been misdiagnosed. And it talks about historically African Americans, we continue to be negatively affected by some of the medications. And we've just been misdiagnosed. We don't trust the people. Socioeconomic factors, just access to the proper care.
Affordability.
Right?
That's going to counseling. So even for myself, again, I went to my the company that I'm at now, and was like, you know what, I'm gonna get myself into some grief counseling because I didn't do it with my dad, I didn't do it with my grandma, so let me put some intention behind this now. Go to my company, hey, what's the information for our EAP? Oh, we don't have an EAP program.
Really?
So then I go to the counselor, she's like, oh yeah, you can come. It's $50 a session,
So, depending on the week,
and I'm like, okay, and I thank God I'm in a position that I might have been able to pay the $50, but it's coming from someplace else.
Yeah.
Mind you, I'm moving some stuff around. And what if I couldn't?
Yeah, so I went to my company where I work at, and I was like, hey, we have an EAP program, and it was like, hey, let me call you. They're like, okay, we can cover you 5 sessions, for your anxiety. But I'm also thinking, they're like, well, who you want to see? In my mind, I'm thinking, I want to see someone who looks like me.
That's where I went.
Yeah.
Because I want someone that can possibly relate to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I found someone who looks like me. So I'm like, cool, I got 5 sessions on you guys. So then they're also telling me, well, hey, if you have another condition, well, I'm gonna give you another 5 sessions. I'm like, okay, well, after we deal, once we deal with my anxiety, let me go on to the next.
But
session.
see, you're navigating the system to make sure you get the care that you really need. It's not like you don't need it.
Right. You need it.
You really need it, right?
Yeah. So that's a good thing, But again, to your point, what if it's somebody who don't have the resources, who don't have the finances to be able to get the help that they need, then they just keep it to themselves. And then we deal with all of the other craziness that comes along with that of the, I'm snapping out. Now you done snapped, and you done killed somebody, you done snapped, you done killed your kid, you done snapped, and
killed yourself.
Yeah, you
done snapped, and you done did all these things, or now you just walking around in the street and you don't know if you coming or going, and your family members is concerned, nobody knows, but that's because we don't have those resources available.
What did you say, Jazz? You said something about, because there was a conversation we was having about how we'll go to our pastor, or we'll go to church, or we'll pray it away, right?
Everybody always want to say we go to your church, we pray it away. Just
Jesus
pray on it.
Heal you.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's why Jesus made psychiatrists and therapists, so you can go and talk to them. Right. He said, I'm going to always be there, and I'm going to be with you through the storm, and I'll make sure you're okay. But I also need for you to speak to these people that got them PhDs at the end of their names.
Exactly. Because as Christians, that doesn't make you exempt. I think you are sometimes under more attack. Right?
Yeah. Yep.
Aren't you? You know, it just because you go to church on Sundays don't mean that you don't have. You probably going because most times you dealing with some stuff.
You're dealing with some stuff.
Right? I love a good Sunday.
Yeah,
I love a good Sunday.
You walk out feeling better.
You
like,
walk to the altar. He done played it on. You done start crying. You done fell to your knees.
He was speaking my story.
You like, did he know I was going through something this morning?
He was speaking my story, but one thing they say is faith and spirituality can help the recovery process,
Absolutely.
but it shouldn't be
our
only option, you know? And I think sometimes we make that our only option. And what's really dope about it is just, even when you say how you are looking to go to someone that looks like you, Taraji P. Henson, she actually started a foundation. It's called the Lawrence Henson Foundation in honor of her father. Her father had, PTSD, I think it is.
Yes.
In the organization, she started it because she was speaking about her son. His father had died when he was 9. Her father had died, and they were both like traumatic events, and she was trying to find someone for her son to go to that looked like her son, or that her son could trust. And the people she took him to, there was that, I guess the connection wasn't there, and she was like, out of her wits trying to find somebody. So she was saying, she was on the Breakfast Club, and it was a really good interview. If you guys have a chance, check it out. How that there's not a lot of black students even going to school for mental health, for mental illness. Right? So the purpose of the foundation is to give kids scholarship so that they can go to school, and also trying to provide those resources in the schools. Because, I mean, the counselors in schools, I don't really even think that they touch on it unless you have a behavior issue.
Behavioral
disorder. Or something traumatic.
Something
traumatic
in the schools, because nowadays they can't.
Yeah, they don't have
to even be there.
The funding to be able to handle
it.
But I think a big piece of it, again, is talking about it, because I found my counselor that looks like me through another person, because I asked. I was like, hey, listen, I'm going through this. I know you lost your mom. How did you deal with that? And she was like, oh, I went to this counselor, Because again, if we don't talk about it, and I think that's the other piece, is that there are a number of black people that do go to counseling.
True.
We don't hear about that.
That's true.
Absolutely.
We don't hear about it because we don't talk about it. And sometimes too, like, and I think it's up to these religious organizations if they don't to create that, because I know my church, Enon, they have a counseling ministry. My uncle literally is the associate pastor of pastoral care and counseling. So they have grief counseling, marriage counseling, depression, domestic violence, you name it.
Right? They got counseling for it.
And so, but if you don't have that, or if your church has it but they're not reporting those numbers, then it makes it look like we're not doing it.
We're not doing it,
But it is becoming more and more popular.
And you feel isolated. But I think it's becoming more and more popular is because we're now speaking out. We're no longer being silent, because we're seeing the benefits of going to therapy, but we're also seeing the pain of being silent and not having these conversations. So I was appreciative to Taraji and all the other counseling organizations that are trying to be more intentional. Our last podcast, I had lifted up a lady who was also, I can't remember her name, and I'm going to try to get it, who was in the Tribune, who was starting, she had her own counseling practice. What's her name?
Wasn't it Oladipo?
Was it Oladipo?
Yep, that was her last name.
Okay. But again, there's just like a lot more intention around it, and they were even saying that now they're trying to make sure that the physicians are trained on the culture of African Americans. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to be trained. You kind of got to know the history of what we may have been, exposed to, right?
Yep.
Before you can go on and treat us.
Well, it's just like we talked about in the last podcast about if you're going to go to a predominantly white school, or if you're going to usher in these black kids, you got to know how to handle them once they get there.
Right.
So you can have all the education you want clinically.
Exactly.
But if you don't have the history.
Yeah. Well, now it's going to be a requirement. And one of the things that they say if you are looking for a provider, some questions to ask them is, have you treated other African Americans? I think it's a great question. Have you received training in cultural competence or African American mental health? How do you see our cultural backgrounds influencing our communities and our treatment? And how do you plan to integrate my beliefs and practices into my treatment? And I think you should kind of go with preparation.
Yep.
And expectations, because even I was telling Jazz, like I went to a lady, years ago, and I don't even know what my expectations were, and I never went back. I went one time, and she actually went to the same, I thought we were talking about two different people. We were talking about the same lady. She went to the same lady, went through the same process, and continued to go back. I'm like, I don't know what my expectations were. I can't even remember what I was dealing with. And I was like, she can't help me. I'm going to deal with it myself, like I always have.
Mm-hmm. Like all of us always have.
That's normally our take on it. Like even like with my nieces, I was telling them like y'all need to go and talk to someone. And both of my nieces so far has been diagnosed with PTSD. Mm-hmm. But even to my niece, she was just like, even in her first session, she was like, it was so intense. I was like, you cried? And she was like, yeah.
Yeah.
She's like, I didn't know that I had so much built up stuff in me until I was just sitting there talking. And even as I was telling Kia, I was like, even when I first met the lady, I said, I went in there with no expectation whatsoever. And even when we started our conversation, it was just like, just tell me what it is you want to talk about. And I just was just letting everything out. And I was crying. I was like, well, shoot, she only asked me one question and I'm sitting up here on the couch.
Because it's like,
because you've been waiting.
Yeah, for somebody to, who has the background to deal with it. That's the thing too, because, and I always tell my girlfriends, I don't have an MD behind my name. Like, girlfriends serve a purpose. Pastors serve a purpose. Families serve a purpose. And it's not to diagnose and to treat you.
No.
Nope.
We shouldn't have that responsibility.
I can't support you. First off, I can't. I got enough going on. I'm going to need you to take this. Plus, too, I think that's the piece that we missed over is that we always talked about keeping our secrets, within the house.
Yeah.
So go to counseling.
Right.
They not allowed to tell you stuff.
They
don't know you.
That's like a secret society.
Like, go. That's the perfect. Great. Okay, you don't want because I get it, and you don't need everybody in your business, but you need to talk to somebody.
Talk to somebody. I'm a big advocate of now, like, just go talk to somebody. I tell my nieces, go talk to somebody. They probably like, if Auntie tell me, go talk to somebody, well, I'm talking to her. No. Talk to somebody that got a PhD at the end of their name and know what you're going through.
That's the best thing
trained
we
and help you.
Absolutely. Because
I've seen some people
go talk to somebody.
Because I've seen some professionals mess up some people.
Well, that's what they were saying.
So talk to somebody, but be intentional. Like you said, do your research. Ask somebody. Listen. If it don't feel right, just like any other relationship.
Yeah.
If you go in there asking these questions and they're like. They're getting short with you, or they can't answer.
That ship ain't gonna work.
Yep.
It was nice knowing you.
Right. Go. Okay. Thank you. I'm not even open up that door.
Yeah. You can't. I mean, there's a barrier up. It's like, how can I be transparent with you when I feel like I'm being blocked? You don't want to.
You don't want to open up. Yeah.
You don't want to open up. Wow. So
I remember you had asked a question earlier, Kia, about why we kind of hold on to it. And I can remember my mom, when I told her that I was going through postpartum, she was like, and they had prescribed me some medication and blah, 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 blah. She was like, well, make sure you don't say nothing. Don't tell nobody you on this or don't tell nobody you on that. And then when you go back to work, don't tell them that you're...
Right.
Because it's a stigma against it.
Right.
I don't care.
Yeah.
And this is what's going on. I communicated it to my CEO in this case. I was like, listen, just a heads up. I'm going to be going to counseling. This was my experience. I think this would be great for me to heal properly. So I'm going to be going from this time to this time. I'll be back at this time. This is how I'll still manage the department.
Right.
all of that.
Yeah. I think companies now, and I know particularly the company that I work for is very intentional about health and wellness, especially mental health and wellness, and I get to be a part of that. Like we had meditation, which is a really good practice to get into. We have a nurse who's on site because a lot of the physical issues are really like mental issues.